Think back to a summer when you were a child. It may have felt enormous. The school year ended and weeks of freedom seemed to stretch so far ahead that the next classroom felt like another lifetime. Now compare that with the past year. A birthday arrives, then another holiday. Then suddenly someone says, "Can you believe the year is almost over?" And you genuinely cannot. The clocks did not speed up, the calendar did not lose any pages, a year still contained the same number of days. But somewhere between childhood and adulthood, time began behaving differently. A month started feeling like a week, entire seasons blurred together. Events that seem recent turn out to have happened 3 years ago. So what changes as we get older? Why can one afternoon feel painfully slow, while 10 years disappear almost without warning? The first thing to understand is that the brain does not experience time in only one way. There is the time you feel while an event is happening, and there is the time you construct later when you look back. Those two versions can behave almost like opposites. Imagine waiting alone for a delayed train with nothing to do. You keep checking the clock. You notice every minute. 10 minutes can feel much longer than 10 minutes. Now imagine spending the same amount of time deeply involved in a conversation, game, or project. You barely notice the clock. The 10 minutes seem to vanish. That is time as it is being experienced. When attention turns toward time itself, time often feels slower. When attention is absorbed elsewhere, it can seem to pass faster. But later, memory can reverse the effect. The boring wait may leave almost nothing behind. You remember checking the clock, staring at the platform, and not much else. The conversation may leave several distinct moments. The surprising story, the joke you did not expect, the change in someone's expression, the idea you kept thinking about afterward. Looking back, the richer period may feel larger because your memory has more events to reconstruct. So an experience can feel fast while it is happening, yet feel substantial when remembered. And a period can feel painfully slow while you are living through it, yet almost disappear when viewed from years away. This difference is central to why life can seem faster with age. Children encounter a world filled with firsts. The first day at a new school, the first time sleeping away from home, the first close friendship, the first time traveling somewhere unfamiliar, the first time realizing adults do not know everything. Even ordinary experiences contain uncertainty because children have fewer existing patterns with which to predict them. A trip across town can become an event. A new teacher can define an entire year. A summer can contain separate worlds, one before a family trip, one during it, and one after returning home. The brain has reasons to pay attention to novelty. When something is unfamiliar, it cannot rely entirely on an old script. It needs to notice more, update its expectations, and build a memory of what happened. Adulthood often contains fewer first encounters of this kind. That does not mean adults stop learning or discovering things, but many parts of life become easier to predict. You wake at a familiar time, travel along a familiar route, open the same applications, see many of the same people, complete variations of tasks you have completed before. The days may be busy, they may even be exhausting, but busyness is not the same as distinctiveness. If Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday contain similar locations, responsibilities, and rhythms, the brain does not necessarily preserve each one as a richly separate episode. It can compress them into a general memory. I was working. We were busy. That month was stressful. The individual days have not vanished, but when you look backward, fewer markers divide them. Imagine two roads of equal length. One road passes through changing landscapes, a forest, a town, a bridge, a coastline, and a mountain. The other passes through nearly identical scenery for the entire journey. While traveling, either road may take the same amount of time, but afterward, the road with more changes is easier to divide into sections. It feels as if more happened along it. Memory appears to do something similar with life. We do not look back and retrieve every hour equally. We rebuild a period from events, transitions, emotional moments, and changes that remained accessible. When those markers are dense, the period may feel fuller. When they're sparse, months can collapse together. This is why a week-long trip can sometimes feel strangely long in memory. Each day contains unfamiliar streets, decisions, meals, faces, and small problems. Meanwhile, several ordinary weeks at home can become one indistinct block. There is an important complication, however. People often simplify this into a slogan. Routine makes time faster, and novelty makes it slower. That is not always true. A repetitive day can feel extremely slow while you are trapped inside it. A thrilling new experience can pass in what feels like seconds. The more accurate distinction is between experienced time and remembered time. Novelty does not necessarily slow every moment while it occurs. It may instead create more memorable boundaries, giving the period greater structure when you later reconstruct it. Routine can do the opposite, slow in the moment, compressed in memory. This helps explain one adulthood's strangest contradictions. The days can feel long, but the years feel short. You can struggle through a tiring Tuesday, count the hours until the weekend, and still feel as though the entire month disappeared. Nothing is wrong with the calendar. The Tuesday was measured while you were inside it. The month was judged through memory. But routine is not the only explanation. There is also the way a year fits inside your life. When you are 5 years old, 1 year is an enormous portion of everything you have experienced. When you are 50, 1 year is a much smaller fraction of your life. This proportional explanation is intuitively appealing. Each new year seems smaller against the growing background of all previous years. But it should not be treated as a complete scientific answer. People do not appear to calculate time by consciously dividing each year by their total age. And research suggests the relationship between age and the feeling that time is accelerating is real, but not overwhelming. Age explains only part of the variation. Two people of the same age can experience the past decade very differently. One may feel that it vanished. The other may remember it as several distinct eras. That means age alone cannot be the mechanism. What matters is not simply how many years you have lived, but how those years were organized, attended to, and remembered. And adulthood changes all three.
As people get older, life often becomes more structured. Childhood is divided by externally imposed transitions. A new school year begins, classes change, bodies change quickly, friend groups reorganize. Holidays feel distinct. Small increases in age alter what you are allowed to do. Then adulthood arrives, and many of those automatic chapters become less frequent. You may remain in the same home, relationship, career, or city for years. The changes are real, but they can become gradual rather than clearly marked. Without obvious boundaries, one period blends into the next. Think about how easily you can identify different years from childhood. That was the year of that teacher. That was when we moved. That was the summer I learned to swim. Now try to separate several recent ordinary years without looking at photographs, messages, or calendars. You may remember major events, but the space between them can become surprisingly difficult to organize. External records often reveal how much time passed unnoticed. A photograph that feels 2 years old is actually 6. A song you still consider new was released a decade ago. A child you remember as a toddler is suddenly speaking like an adult. These moments are unsettling because they expose a gap between calendar time and remembered time. Your life continued, but memory did not create an equally detailed record of every interval. There is also the growing speed of responsibility. Adults frequently manage several timelines at once: work deadlines, bills, family needs, appointments, messages, maintenance, future plans. When attention is continually directed toward the next requirement, the present can become a corridor between tasks. Finish this so you can begin that. Get through today so you can reach the weekend. Get through the week so you can reach the vacation. Get through this busy period so life can finally calm down. But life rarely announces that the busy period has officially ended. A new demand replaces the old one. Attention keeps leaning forward, and the present receives less deliberate notice. This does not necessarily make the hour feel fast. Stress can make individual periods feel slow and unpleasant. But when weeks are organized mainly around obligations, they may later be remembered by category rather than as distinct experiences. Time pressure has also been associated with the feeling that longer periods passed quickly. The more life feels as though it is constantly moving ahead of you, the easier it becomes to experience years as something that happened while you were preparing for the next thing. Technology may intensify this pattern, although it is too simple to blame phones for the entire effect. Digital life fills small, empty spaces. Waiting in line, sitting on a bus, or arriving early once created pauses in which attention could drift toward the environment or the self. Now those moments are easily filled with messages, feeds, videos, and updates. The stimulation is real, but much of it is similar in form and quickly replaced by the next item. A person may process hundreds of pieces of content and remember almost none of them as separate events. The time is occupied without necessarily becoming memorable. Again, this creates a contradiction. A full day is not always a memorable day. Activity can consume time without giving memories strong landmarks by which to reconstruct it. But if routine and compression help explain why time feels faster, does the solution require constantly chasing novelty? Not exactly. You do not need to turn every week into an international adventure. Novelty without attention can also vanish. You can visit somewhere new while spending the entire experience thinking about messages, photographs, or what comes next. The deeper issue is differentiation. What made this day unlike the one before it? What changed? What did you notice? What gave the period a beginning, middle, or end? A new walking route may be enough. Cooking something unfamiliar, having a conversation without checking a screen, learning a skill that makes progress visible, returning to a place and noticing how it changed, creating a small ritual that separates one season from another. These experiences provide boundaries. They tell memory this was not simply another copy of yesterday. Attention matters just as much. Consider two people taking the same walk. One spends the entire time replaying work problems. The other notices the temperature, the changing light, an unfamiliar building, and a strange conversation overheard nearby. The clock records the same duration, but the two minds do not necessarily construct the same experience. Deliberate attention does not literally slow time. It can, however, make an interval more textured and easier to remember. That distinction matters because people sometimes respond to the fear of time accelerating by trying to pack more into life. More destinations, more activities, more photographs, more events added to the calendar. But an overfilled schedule can create its own form of compression. If each experience is rushed to make room for the next, the days may contain many events without receiving much attention. The goal is not maximum activity, it is greater definition. This also explains why rituals can feel surprisingly powerful. Birthdays, annual trips, weekly meals, seasonal traditions, even walking to the same place at a specific time can create points of comparison. You remember last year's version and notice what has changed. Without repetition, there is no comparison, but without variation, repetition becomes invisible. A useful ritual contains both, something familiar enough to connect different years and enough change to reveal the passage between them. There is another difficult truth behind the feeling that time accelerates. As we age, we become more aware that the future is limited. A child may experience a year as an obstacle standing between them and something they want. An adult can experience the same year as something disappearing from a finite supply. This may make the acceleration feel emotionally heavier. The problem is no longer simply why did that month pass so quickly, it becomes how many more months will pass this way. That thought can turn an ordinary feature of memory into a source of anxiety. But constantly monitoring time is not a solution. Watching every minute can make life feel slower in the moment while making the person less present inside it. The aim cannot be to force subjective time to crawl. Some of the best experiences feel fast precisely because attention is fully engaged. A meaningful conversation can vanish in an hour. A creative project can consume an afternoon. A day with someone you love can feel unfairly brief. That does not mean the time was lost. The better question is what remains afterward.
Did the period leave memories, changes, relationships, skills, or a sense that you were actually there? A fast experience can still become a rich memory, and a slow experience can leave almost nothing. So why does time feel faster as you get older? Not because a hidden clock in the brain simply accelerates with every birthday, and not only because each year becomes a smaller fraction of life. Time seems to accelerate partly because adulthood often becomes more predictable, more compressed by routine, and more focused on future obligations. Fewer experiences are stored as clear beginnings and endings. Similar days merge. Attention moves ahead. Memory reconstructs months from a limited number of landmarks. The year contained thousands of hours, but when you look back, you do not experience those hours again. You experience the record your mind managed to build. This is why the childhood summer seemed endless. It wasn't necessarily because children possessed a slower internal clock. It was a landscape filled with changes, first experiences, anticipation, and clearly separated chapters. The present felt large because so much of it had not happened before. We cannot return to childhood by creating endless novelty, nor can we stop years from passing by paying attention harder. But we can give time more shape. We can notice transitions instead of allowing them to blur. We can create landmarks rather than only deadlines. We can occasionally interrupt routines before entire seasons collapse into one memory. The clock will continue at exactly the same speed, but a life is not experienced only through clocks. It is also experienced through attention and remembered through change. Perhaps time does not feel faster merely because we are getting older. Perhaps it feels faster because once life becomes familiar, the mind stops marking every mile. Research distinguishes time as it feels in the moment from retrospective judgments of longer periods. Attention, emotion, time pressure, memory accessibility, routine, and age can all contribute, but no single theory fully explains why life seems to accelerate. Age-related effects